You're listening to Trek.fm.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th Anniversary Rewatch of all 729 Star Trek adventures, from Broken Bow, Oklahoma, all the way to Yorktown Base and Star Trek Beyond. I'm your host for today, Lee Hutchison, and I'm joined once again by Amy Nelson.
Hello, hello.
How are you today, Amy?
Doing fabulous and looking forward to talking these Nazis.
Yeah, Amy, do you want to tell our listeners what Killing Game is about?
Well, after Voyager is captured by the Hirogens, the ship is turned into a massive holodeck so that the Hirogens can hunt members of the crew.
Ooh. So we're going to discuss this episode all, and the fact that we've got this block, it's all Killing Game all in this episode, we're just going to discuss parts 1 and 2, blend it together, pretend this is a feature-length night on UPN. So yeah, the Killing Game, what do you think of it, Amy?
I liked it. I don't know if it would be in my top, but I really enjoyed seeing the Hirogens and the one at least trying to change his culture so that they can survive. I mean, I think that's an interesting twist, and then just turning everything into holodeck is just, the consequence of that main storyline. What did you think of it?
Yeah, this is an episode I've always fondly remembered, The Killing Game. I think it's a delightful romp of an episode. There's quite a lot of brilliant humour in this, some imaginative ideas, but I kind of viewed it through a different prism this time. I was recently watching, don't burn me here, Star Trek fans, I was watching the Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens. And one of my dear friends is half German, and I was watching with someone that's kind of from Germany, so we were watching it, and they were talking about the scene where you've got I can't remember the name of the guy just now, but Domhnall Gleeson's character, and this idea that kind of German culture is always represented on screen as the Nazis, and Star Trek is really, really guilty of that. The original series did it, Voyager did it, Enterprise did it, that the only ever time that we see Germans represented in Star Trek is the Nazis. And I think it's such a tired cliche. I think it's hugely disrespectful, because we've got a Star Trek, and I recently was at Star Trek Europe, and there's a lot of German fans there, and we talk about that, yeah, Star Trek should have transgender characters, gay representation, we should have, equal diversity. But it must be really frustrating if you're a German fan and the only time you get to see your species, your race represented in Star Trek is through the Nazis. And that kind of tainted my viewing of The Killing Game, that I never really clicked with that before. And I think it's disappointing. It's a great romp of an episode, but this cliche kind of frustrated me on watching it this time.
Yes, I have to agree with you. Also, I was at the Las Vegas convention, and met people from Germany, specifically Berlin, and you get that. It's like, man, why is it always the same? And I've thought about this, especially with the Hirogen, that it's like, here is an entire species and they are defined by the hunt, and is every single person in that species, is that their main goal? And so how would we define us, the human race? What would be our defining? And it seems like, well, if you're German, then your defining trait is the Nazi party. And I don't feel that it's fair. And so that's why I did like seeing the Hirogen trying to change that, to broaden, their perspective, and that not every Hirogen is for the hunt.
Yeah, I think Star Trek does that well at points as well with the Hirogen, that, we've only had them a couple of episodes, Prey and Hunters so far, and, enjoyable episodes, but with the Killing Game, it's that good thing that, we can't define them just by that one trait. That was a problem for the Klingons for a long time, and even until kind of Enterprise was the first time to do it, that episode Judgment, where it's like, yeah, we've got lawyers and we've got people that are not interested in the hunt, in kind of the Klingon culture, as it were, the warrior kind of race. And we see that with a lot of races. The Romulans, they're kind of duplicitous, and we get the odd shading of it sometimes, but for kind of 729 odd episodes, that too many of these races are defined as a cliche, and it's just a bit frustrating. This kind of German culture is kind of defined once again in Star Trek as, we'll go for the Nazis. It's frustrating. I feel for those fans, and Star Wars is doing it. We see it too often in sci-fi, that kind of trope of let's do the Nazis. It's usually they have a British person playing it, so that's always a cliche in itself. But yeah, it's just a frustrating element. But there's a lot in this episode with that I think the first part is actually really good. I think the setup is fantastic. This building of tension as it builds up to the end of the first part, where the holodeck explodes and it's kind of exposed the Voyager ship. I think the episode really builds up there. Harry Kim, once again, reduced to being smacked around, and he must be frustrated. He's like, I just want to play in the holodeck. I think that stuff's really good, and it builds the tension well. Him and the Doctor working together. I think the French nightclub stuff, the French Resistance, that's a cool element of it. Things like that I really like in the first part in particular. I think when it gets to the second part, it becomes a bit tedious in terms of it's just like kind of a bit actiony slog. We've got the kind of build up, and then it kind of just like everyone's kind of shooting around for the second hour. There's some good stuff in it, but that gets a bit kind of boring. Good stuff.
Yeah, I liked the opened, where you're seeing Janeway as a Klingon. I mean, that was great. I mean, I was watching it and I was like, wait, she looks familiar. That's Captain Janeway. And what's going on? 'Cause I haven't really seen this episode. So when I was watching it in preparation for this, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I also liked, you could see the hints of distrust of Seven of Nine, especially with Tuvok, where Janeway's coming back and she specifically tells Tuvok, I trust her. And he still is unwary about, trusting Seven of Nine. So you can sort of see residues of that. So I liked that.
Yeah, like there's some interesting beats throughout the episode. I always love the moment, and it gets me every single time, is when Neelix and the Doctor are sitting underneath the canopy, and the Klingons are marching in to take on the space Nazis and the Hirogen. And they're like, "Kapla!" and then they hide under the canopy while people are dripping blood. They're like, yes, that's a brilliant little character bit. I think that nails it for me.
Yeah. So what about with when they overload the holographic transmitters and then only the people and weapons disappear and not the buildings? Just a small thing.
Yeah. Like this episode, the holodeck is a total, it doesn't really make much sense. But I like the idea that there's kind of all this crew, especially in the World War II graphic situation, where they've got all these people are crammed into what's probably like a kind of bedroom size thing, and it's like you're trying to work out so they're the Americans, so they're like tens of miles away, and then you've got the certain people in this restaurant. You can almost just feel yourself having an aneurysm trying to work out how everyone's crammed into this little space.
Yeah, well, they sort of extend it to the ship, so yeah, I guess you could say it's a little larger than the normal, but
Yeah, and there's one thing I'm curious to get. I think there's an interesting debate to be had here. Obviously, this will kind of be referred to again in Flesh and Blood in a couple seasons' time. But what did you make of Janeway giving them the holodeck technology at the end? What was your take on that?
I thought it showed that she wanted to help them improve and have that optimistic, I'm going to trust you. I think that's very Star Trek-y.
Yeah, I'm okay with her doing it, but it's that kind of annoyance that throughout the series we hear, even giving away a replicator where someone could, you could restrict to just eating and drinking from it. They don't want to give away that kind of technology, especially to the Kazon in the first few seasons, that it's such a core principle of the Star Trek Voyager show that we don't share the technology with, say, the Kazons. And then they're giving them the holographic technology, and I know it's a bit safer than perhaps the replicators, where I'm sure they could, a few tweaks here and there, they could maybe start producing weapons. But then with the technology of the holodeck as well, that disable the safeties and you could be luring people and shooting them. It's I always find that ending a bit of an odd one, a bit of a cop-out, that it feels like a slight betrayal of the principles, or that they're willing to bend this way for the Hirogen, but say for the Kazon, for example, they weren't willing to bend. And they're both kind of bit despicable races in what we've learned from them so far. That did they trust them a bit too soon to be giving them such an amazing piece of technology? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, now I'm wondering.
We'll be sending a message to Brandon Braga demanding an explanation. So what else did you enjoy about the Killing Game two-parter?
I really liked Chakotay and Paris, being the Americans and coming in, and I thought they played that very well.
No surprise, the Americans get to be the gung-ho heroes, while us Brits get to play the Nazis, and Germans have to do that. Typical Hollywood, eh?
Oh, yeah.
That's what they get for getting a Brit here and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to be standing on my European soapbox going, how dare you define us like this?
Exactly.
I think Tom Paris is brilliant in this episode, like in the second part where he's just sitting there with the chewing gum, and it's true to his role that, I'm loving this. This is brilliant. This is so cool. And I love that B'Elanna Torres gets to, well, obviously Roxanne Dawson was pregnant during this run of episodes, and we've seen her just in the previous episodes wearing a double jersey, and then this, like, oh well, we'll actually introduce the pregnancy as a part of the episode. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was cool. And to see, Paris stick up for B'Elanna, when they're in the office being held captive, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
definitely. I think there's a frustrating element with this episode, but if you're kind of willing to forgive it, or for some people it's not necessarily an issue, there's a lot to enjoy in this episode, and I think it's definitely one of the best two-part episodes of Voyager, that's for sure. I think a lot of people kind of hold this one in very high regard, and it's a very consistent episode. I think even just always remembered seeing the explosion at the end of part one and thinking, oh, that's such a cool moment, seeing the decks completely exposed, and yeah, it's so cool. And I'm sure it'll take episodes and episodes for them to clear that damage, but yeah, I think it's a good episode. It's a really good episode of season 4. Yeah, definitely one of the high points. Well,
and definitely memorable. So you got to give it that.
Absolutely. And, we complain about Voyager here and there that it lacks memorable episodes, but the Killing Game, I don't think anyone forgets that after
Exactly.
They see that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to tell you about their thoughts on the Killing Game, Amy, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, they can find me at Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson and on the Babel Conference. And Lee, where can people talk to you about space Nazis?
Yeah. You can talk to me about space Nazis anytime, anyone. You can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo, at Star Trek VHS. You can find me on my own podcast talking about geek culture with Tristan Riddell and Matt Hansen, The Senate Floor. And yeah, you can find us both on the Babel Conference. We'd love to hear your thoughts on German culture. Is it unfairly represented in Star Trek? Is this episode just one of the best bits of fun Star Trek's ever done? I'd love to hear your thoughts as always. So yeah, until next time, live long and prosper, everyone.